Bit of an earlier start this morning as we've got Governor's Day at the Illinois State Fair, and the Democratic County Chairs Association has their morning brunch. So we got to get people in place to cover that, and then head out to the state fairgrounds to cover their midday rally for Democrats. As today's Governor's Day, tomorrow is Republican Day. So there will be a Republican rally at the fairgrounds on Thursday, and we'll definitely be there to cover that as well. So getting a little bit of an early start this morning. A couple of segments will focus on Chicago, because we've got, of course, the Chicago Teachers Union and Chicago Public Schools discussing their next contract and finances. Why is it important for the rest of the state of Illinois? Well, with Illinois in Focus, we focus on how taxpayers are being impacted, and $2.6 billion going to Chicago Public Schools from Illinois state taxpayers. So we'll review some of the conversation, especially from the perspective of Stacey Davis Gates, the president of the Chicago Teachers Union, and some of the statements that she made yesterday during a public bargaining discussion. And then we'll be joined by William Kelly, the reporter out of Chicago, to get a bit of a preview of what's going to be happening at next week's Democratic National Convention in Chicago. So those are just some of the things we're going to tackle this morning with Illinois in Focus Daily. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell with America's Talking Network and the Center Square. And we've got plenty to get to and tons to tackle. So it's right here with Illinois in Focus Daily. Taxpayers on the hook for about $2.6 billion for Chicago Public Schools. And with a public schools budget of around $10 billion, you've got the Chicago's Teachers Union looking to get even more in their contract. And all of this while you've got federal COVID relief funds expiring and budget shortfalls being raised as a concern, while pressure from a teachers union contract could push costs up higher. But what about student performance? How's that being equated into this conversation? Good morning, Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell wherever you get your podcasts for Illinois in Focus. But also you can be with us each and every weekday morning as we go live with America's Talking Network. All right, so let's get into this. Of course, the Chicago Teachers Union looking to get a new contract. It's not expected that they'll have one by the time that school starts in Chicago. But Chicago Public Schools, if you look at the report card from the Illinois State Board of Elections, you can get a good breakdown of what Chicago Public Schools looks like. So just a snapshot here. And in particular, the demographics of Chicago Public Schools. And if you look at the overall trends at the Illinois report card, you can see that Chicago Public Schools enrollment in 2018 was about 372,000, and it has steadily declined down to 319,789 in 2023. So clearly there are fewer Chicago Public School students, but the funding, of course, continues to be billions and billions of dollars. So we'll look at some more of the statistics here of Chicago Public Schools, but altogether $9.9 billion. That's what Chicago Public Schools officials are ultimately putting out as the costs for investments and student academic performance and supporting educational equity across the district, they say. And of that, you're going to expect to see $2.6 billion in state funds. And that's because of the additional $350 million, not just to Chicago Public Schools, but total increase statewide for education, $350 million extra. That's what this school funding formula that was approved several years ago included. So in the past 7 years, 8 years or so that we've had this new school funding formula, it might be 6, 7 years, you've got an increase of billions of dollars across the states that's gone to public schools, again, across the states, but hundreds of millions for Chicago public schools. So all of this, of course, as Illinois has among the highest property taxes in the country, and the state has a process of having most of your property tax bill go to your school district. If you look at your property tax bill, you'll see several taxing bodies taking their chunk, but for school districts, that's the largest chunk that's coming out of your property tax bill. So some thinking is more state funds can go to, more state taxpayer funds can go to public schools, and they can try to alleviate some of the property tax burden, but we're not seeing that across some of these districts where property taxes continue to go up despite the increase in state spending on all of this. And of course, we get federal dollars, federal tax dollars for all of this spending as well. So Chicago Public Schools have been holding public negotiations, public hearings about their finances. They've had 2 so far. One focused on ensuring that they get grade schoolers up to gear and just school facilities altogether. But last night they had a public hearing on contracts, on financing, and the teachers union were a part of this. Here's Stacey Davis Gates during that negotiation session with some of her opening comments. And again, she's the president of the Chicago Teachers Union.
As a high school social studies teacher, I would be remiss to tell you that the Chicago Public Schools were built for the diversity of Chicago. The contrary of that is that the rich people, the corporations that created our school district did so for workers to maintain a lower class, people that they didn't have to pay much, people who could take orders. And so when you only create a system for good enough for me to have an employee, that becomes the tradition and the culture. That's why you have leaders saying that they're not going to bail Chicago public schools out. That's why you hear people tell us that our contract costs too much money, when quite frankly, it is our contract that the Chicago Public Schools continues to present in their press releases. Think about it for a minute. When we were here for our first public bargaining session, what I heard was that we do have air conditioning in school, but that happens because there was a strike in 2012 that won those air conditioning. Then I hear about the achievement that we are making far ahead of other school districts in this country. And I think, well, those staffing positions came from the 2019 strike. So this contract that we speak of in such pejorative terms actually is the infrastructure and the basis under which this district survives.
So Stacey Davis Gates, again, seeming to hint at some strikes in the past. And there have been a handful of strikes over a handful of years from Chicago teachers, including, if I recall correctly, during the COVID lockdowns and the possible return to school. So, is she hinting at if Chicago teachers don't get their way, they'll possibly look at some kind of strike again? And what kind of impact does that have on Chicago students? Final few moments here from Stacey Davis Gates last night in that public opening comment.
So when we talk about this contract, talk about the infrastructure of the district. Remember that this is the infrastructure of school communities, because this contract puts people in it that love, nurture, and provide instruction for our city's youth. That's the contract.
So a lot of talk about what kind of costs the taxpayer is going to have to incur for a new contract for Chicago Teachers Union, especially in the face of the loss of federal tax dollars for COVID relief. ESSER funds is what they're called. And how does that impact all of this? But afterwards, after the negotiation session, Davis Gates took to a microphone for a news conference of sorts and shared even more of her thoughts on the bargaining process.
Because see, this is generational impact. You can't go back to school after you leave it. You don't get to redo K through 12 and come back as a kindergartner to a well-resourced school once you've graduated. So there's a certain amount of urgency that we don't see or participate in with the Board of Education and with the Chicago Public Schools. You can't just virtue signal. You actually have the ability. They are the largest school district in this state. The greatest amount of children in the state of Illinois attend the Chicago Public Schools.
But again, we look at the numbers here, the demographic data, and over the years, that number has shrank by more than 52,000 students. 2018, 372,000. Then 2023, 319,000. So there's a continued shrinkage for Chicago Public Schools. Some people may point to population decline. And if you look at population decline, there's even some speculating that we've gotten to a very low point in population for Illinois compared to previous years. Illinois, land of Lincoln, is the land of lost people because we've had a decade of decline in the state of Illinois. But even that decline, not something that is being recognized as you've got Illinois policy highlighting that, 1920 population, 2.7 million, 2023 population, 2.6 million. That's just Chicago. But people pushing back on that, including the governor's spokesperson, saying that it's being poorly reported and the data is not correct. Jordan Abadiah, she posted this on X. We're not acknowledging it because it's been reported this isn't true and the data's flawed. It's really hard to let go of a baked-in narrative, and there are definitely things we can improve on in Illinois, but we can't do that if we're distracted. But people pointing out that Jordan and others get two paychecks, one from the state of Illinois taxpayers and another from the governor's own funds. So double salary, essentially. But regardless, it's not just census data because Democrats do point to correction that the census made in their estimations of lost population in the state of Illinois, saying they didn't count certain types of multi-resident living quarters. And regardless of that, even if they did edge those numbers up, the state's population has not changed in the official tally. But it's not just Census Bureau data. It's also the moving company data. U-Haul and United Van Lines, putting Illinois among the states have the most people move out. But it's not just that private sector data. It's also public sector data with Internal Revenue Service migration data that shows Illinois continues to lose population by people moving from the state of Illinois to other states as they track the tax filings and the migration of those tax filings. But regardless, back to Chicago Public Schools, maybe the population decline is evident in the numbers that we're seeing here. 2018, 372,000 students down to 319,000 in 2023. But more from Stacey Davis Gates from yesterday after the public negotiation session.
There's a lot of power in that because it also means we send the most representatives and senators to Springfield. Right. It also means that the governor of Illinois lives in Chicago as well. We have a Speaker of the House who's a former school board member. We have a Senate president who hails from a school district that's doing very well with their students because they have everything that we're asking for. So listen, good enough ain't good enough no more.
What is the Chicago School District doing good? Let's take a look at some of the academic progress for Chicago Public Schools. And again, this is from the Illinois State Board of Education Illinois report card. In academic progress, let's just look at proficiency rates. All right, 25% English language arts proficiency, 18% math proficiency, 37% science proficiency. And regardless of that, you've got graduation rates at 83% and 86% of ninth graders on track. So how those numbers ultimately square up, I guess, is a conversation for another day. But Chicago Public Schools with a nearly $10 billion budget and Chicago Teachers Union looking to have a new contract before the school year starts, which I don't know if that's going to happen. All of this as Illinois taxpayers spend $2.2 billion on Chicago Public Schools. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Join us each and every weekday morning here with America's Talking Network and the Center Square. Are going to be on Chicago next week for the Democrat National Convention, and you've got the estimation of tens of thousands of protesters that are going to be on the scene, among thousands of delegates and elected officials heading to Chicago so Democrats can finalize their party's ticket. So what are we going to see on the streets? What are we going to see inside the convention hall? Somebody who's in Chicago right now and clearly seeing all of the fencing putting up, all of the ironclad gates being put up, and the increased security and street precautions. Independent Chicago reporter William Kelly joins us now. William, thanks for taking time, and I want to hear from you as to what you're seeing right now on the streets as we prepare for next week's Democratic National Convention. Good morning.
God bless you, Greg. Yeah, well, I'm seeing a lot of angry Chicagoans. They're calling hypocrisy. You know, we had 80 plus people shot in Chicago last week. And, you know, I mean, by any account, that's a war zone. And yet our public officials are telling us that they're going to keep the DNC party guests safe. This is not playing the way I think any political party or candidate would want it to play. Another, I think, good example, Greg, if I may. I've got a million of them. I don't know how much time you have, but here's a good one for you. Businesses are telling their employees to stay home. Now, the convention was sold to us that this would be a great opportunity for business, but yet they're telling their employees to stay home, Greg.
William, obviously thousands of people coming to Chicago specifically for the convention as members of the Democratic Party, as delegates, as officials that are going to be there. Of course, the Center Square will be on the ground up in Chicago. We'll be bouncing between the morning breakfasts for Illinois delegates to the McCormick Place for daily briefings to the convention hall for more interviews and analysis of what's going on the ground. But on the outside, William, up to 100,000 protesters? What are you hearing as far as the numbers, and what kinds of steps are city officials taking to keep everything in order so people can peacefully protest?
I love it. I'm looking forward to reporting with you in person on this. But yeah, there are fences going up, and there's the red zone and the orange zone and the green zone, and they're going to search your car. And I mean, it doesn't feel like a party, Greg. It doesn't feel like any kind of party I would ever want to be invited to.
Well, I think what you're going to see, and having witnessed this firsthand from the Republican National Convention, again, a totally different convention, different atmosphere and everything. On the outside, it looked like it was, a bunch of people with signs being corralled by law enforcement on bikes. I even saw horses. Who knows what kind of modes of transportation the law enforcement in Chicago are going to have for next week's convention. I'm sure we'll see a mix, but the outside was somewhat organized, and people in the streets chanting with signs and whatnot. But blocks away, it was a totally different party. So, kind of a split screen there, but ultimately you're saying that the protesters, are they going to be able to have the conventioners see and hear their protest with where they're going to be kept at bay by law enforcement?
Yeah, I think you just coined the phrase, Greg. Split screen America is what we're looking at here. We have, you know, I believe in free speech. I believe I may not agree with everyone, but I would literally fight to the death to defend their rights to freedom of speech. And what really concerns me is that in the city of Chicago, we're going to see, we've already seen that Chicago is cracking down on free speech, and it breaks my heart. They're also predicting, by the way, migrant buses during the convention, and they're going to send them to the South Side, Greg. As someone who was born and raised on the South Side of Chicago, let me tell you, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Okay. So, it's really weird how we're hearing about protesters coming to Chicago. We're hearing about migrants being sent to Chicago. I don't see how this adds up to a successful experience for not only Democrat delegates, but for Chicagoans, Greg. It breaks my heart on every level.
Talk a bit more about the plans for the migrants that are already there, but also, if you could, share any insight you've got on the possibility of more buses of migrants coming from the southern U.S. border. State officials have said that they haven't seen that yet, but, I mean, the Democrat convention, it doesn't start until Monday.
Right. Well, I mean, what is more dysfunctional at this point, Venezuela or Chicago? I mean, I'm just afraid. I guess if I had dark humor, I would find some kind of humor in this. I'm just afraid that Venezuelans are going to get off the bus from Venezuela and think that they've arrived back in Venezuela. I mean, at this point, it's very, very difficult, Greg, no joke, to tell the difference between Chicago and Venezuela. And I'm saying that as somebody who walks down Michigan Avenue every day. I mean, there was a big criticism of Richard M. Daley. Okay, not to be confused with Richard J. Daley. So for people who maybe don't have all of the Daley, all of the DNC Chicago history timeline in front of them right now, but there was a big criticism of Richard M. Daley that when he hosted a DNC convention, that he was painting over graffiti and he was planting flowers in Michigan Avenue and he was putting up brand new, beautiful sculptures on bridges, etc. Really? That was the criticism back then? My God, how far have we fallen, Greg? We're at a point now where, we have a mayor who thinks that covering up graffiti is racist and preventing homeless people, mentally ill, violent homeless people, from attacking citizens on Michigan Avenue is racist.
William Kelly, obviously, in the next week or so, we're going to see a lot of activity in Chicago. Chicago police have already indicated that there's a lot of other law enforcement that are going to be coming in from outside of Chicago. I imagine they're going to be posted up around McCormick Place and around the United Center where the official activities are taking place. But Chicago police have said that they're going to be going out to all of the other 77 neighborhoods to ensure that those communities stay safe. What do you foresee happening here in the next week, especially over the weekend heading into next week? Are we going to see increased patrols? Are we going to see increased ability for law enforcement in Chicago to go after bad actors? Are we going to see prosecutors step up and actually look to detain people who may be arrested for crimes? How do you see this playing out next week?
Well, Kim Foxx has already said that she will prosecute people who protest the DNC. She just hasn't prosecuted anyone who has committed any number of violent crimes in the city of Chicago for what seems like forever. So, she's prosecuting a guy who threw a big gulp at her, believe it or not. But yet a couple who lost their baby due to a violent, vicious, violent attack in Streeterville, where we are. She uh, sentenced, or excuse me, charged the attackers with a misdemeanor. So I mean, it's you know, there's I guess what you would almost have to call a two-tier justice system in Chicago now. If you are a repeat violent offender, you don't have to worry about ever seeing more than a night or two in jail. But apparently, if you come to Chicago because you feel passionately and you want to have your voices heard, you can expect to be arrested. Uh, Superintendent Snelling, who is by the way, appointed by the mayor. He's a political appointee, Greg, make no mistake about it, has said that he intends to keep the DNC party guests safe and the Chicagoans safe outside of the DNC, the bubble, the security bubble for the DNC. But clearly, the Chicagoans weren't safe last weekend. How are they going to be safe next weekend with people estimating 100,000 protesters, another 20,000, 50,000 migrants? How are Chicagoans going to be safe next weekend if they weren't safe last weekend, Greg?
William Kelly, independent reporter out of Chicago. Greatly appreciate your time as always, and we'll have to find each other at some point next week so that we can hook up and maybe get a picture taken together instead of being virtual here. So greatly appreciated as always, and we'll talk soon. All right, be safe up there in Chicago.
God bless you, Greg. Thank you.
It is Illinois in Focus Daily. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell each and every weekday morning as we bring you things you need to know when you start your day here in the land of Lincoln. All right, next week is the Democratic National Convention. The Center Square will be on the ground. Be sure to get the podcast for Illinois in Focus Daily. Also get the Center Square's daily newsletter to stay plugged in. And so much more, all right? It is Illinois in Focus Daily. Illinois' gas tax now second highest in the nation, according to the latest from the Tax Foundation. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you for being with us each and every weekday morning. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and join us as we keep you posted on what you need to know. All right, let's get to this story here. Just a brief segment, something that you're feeling at the pump, drivers in Illinois going to the gas station. I see this a lot when I go visit family in Missouri. Illinois' gas is always probably 40 to 60 cents higher than just across the river in Missouri. Some of you might live close to Indiana or Kentucky or some of the other bordering states, and you might find yourself going across the border to not just fill up on gas, but also to grab yourself some groceries or whatnot, or even buy tobacco products, for instance. But the Tax Foundation, which of course is a nonprofit, they give us an indication of how tax are across the country, and they compare and contrast. So here's the latest that they have on gas taxes at their website, gas tax rates by 2024. Gas taxes affect the lives and finances of most Americans. Today's map illustrates gas tax rates across the state for 2024. Now, states levy taxes on fuel in a few different ways, including sales tax, something that Illinois does do, excise tax per gallon, something that Illinois does do, and taxes on wholesalers or retailers, which generally get passed on to the consumer via increased prices. Again, all of this the consumer's paying. Those taxes, combined with a myriad of fees, underground storage tank fees, for example, add to the price consumers pay at the pump. So what the Tax Foundation did, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, they said that they combined these taxes and fees to calculate the total tax rate on gas for each state. And the map demonstrates the wide range of tax rates across the U.S. So where does Illinois land on this? We've been high on the list before. And I'd previously seen that, for instance, Illinois has the highest gas tax in the Midwest. But for the overall country now, according to the latest numbers from the Tax Foundation, Illinois ranked second in the country. What is that, behind only California? Yeah, California's first. It's 68.1 cents per gallon. 68.1 cents per gallon. Illinois, 66.5 cents per gallon, ranked second. What about Missouri? Missouri's ranked 37th at 24.9 cents a gallon. Just compare Illinois, 66.5 versus Missouri, 24.9. So that's what? More than a 40 cent difference. And this is all, of course, Illinois doubling the gas tax, the state gas tax. All right. So it was 19 cents in 2019, rather 18 cents, and then it doubled to 39 cents in 2019. And then it tacked on an annual increase every year pegged to inflation. And that has increased the gas tax every year on July 1st. By a cent, by 2 cents, by 3 cents, depending on inflation. But now Illinois has the second highest gas taxes in the country, according to the Tax Foundation. So let's continue to see here more analysis from the Tax Foundation on Illinois' gas tax and other states' gas taxes. California pumps up gas tax 68.1 cents per gallon, followed by Illinois, 66.5 cents per gallon, and Pennsylvania, 58.7 cents. The lowest gas taxes, Alaska. Well, that's because they've got a lot of oil production up there. But you go on to read further. It says the gas tax is meant to function as a user fee, charging drivers to fund the construction and maintenance of roads that they drive on. User fees are a way to attribute the cost of government services to the people who use them, avoiding charging people taxes for things they do not want or use. Transportation services particularly benefit from user fee pay structures. However, with the increased prominence of electric vehicles, the Tax Foundation says, which avoid the gas tax, and general improvements to vehicle fuel efficiencies, the gas tax's ability to be efficient user fee for roads is steadily diminishing. Additionally, many states do not index their rates to inflation, so the real value of their revenues erodes over time. Again, Illinois pegging increases to inflation. Many states have considered replacing their gas tax with the vehicle mile traveled tax instead. Illinois has toyed with that idea, but each time it comes up, constituents flood sponsors of such legislation with negative comments. But we'll see how that goes elsewhere. So clearly, a lot of different factors involved in analysis of gas taxes, but Illinois has the second highest gas tax in the country. And that is clearly something that you're feeling in your pocketbook. But I think something interesting that the Tax Foundation notes is that this indicates how much it costs for government. All right. So in Missouri, are labor costs different than in Illinois when it comes to road construction, when it comes to maintenance of roads? Or is the overall government cost for overhead, employees, bureaucracies, is it different in Missouri than Illinois? I think you can kind of just look at the state's finances side by side and maybe come to your own conclusions there. So clearly, Illinois having among the highest gas tax, not just the second highest gas tax, now we have the second highest property tax. And we're also in general taxes like sales tax and so on. You combine all of that and you can see just how much burden is on Illinois taxpayers and Illinois consumers. It is Illinois in Focus Daily, each and every weekday morning, keeping you posted on stuff you need to know to get your day going. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us each and every weekday morning here with Illinois in Focus Daily. All right, that's all I got for you today. We've got the Democrats rallying at the Illinois State Fair today. You got their morning brunch, and then they'll go to the fairgrounds, so we'll have coverage of that for you tomorrow. And then tomorrow, the Republicans have their rally at the State Fair, so we'll bring you coverage on that for Friday morning. So just a preview of some of what's coming up. Of course, next week, the Center Square will be on the ground in Chicago. We'll be looking at what the protesters have to say, getting reaction from delegates, and keeping track of everything that's going on on the convention floor. So be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell for America's Talking Network, Illinois in Focus Daily, where you get your podcasts, and get that newsletter at thecentersquare.com. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow.